Alright, the Elden Ring trailer dropped about 3 weeks ago and it doesn't leave much for the imagination. I mean, it shows what feels like the entire game, but I'm here just to focus on the bosses. And from what we know, these bosses are demigods who inherited the mad-tainted power of the Elden Ring shards. However, in obtaining these shards, it transformed their body, turning them into a disfigured beast. And as said in an interview, there are 6 of these demigods, each associated with one of the 6 areas. But that's enough background, let's actually look at the trailer. And around the 1 minute mark, we get our first appearance of a boss. And if you're wondering how I'm predicting he is a boss, the design says it all, which is very distinct in nature and carries a sort of personality to it. Also, the environment you find him in is oddly open. Now, this first shot has him standing up, but if you wait a couple seconds, we can tell this is a slam attack, meaning that he actually maneuvers on all 8 legs, which is shown in the other scenes. From these 2 facts already, he seems like he'll be a more frenzied beast boss, such as Vord or even the blood-starved beast. Now, going back to his slam attack, it reveals an oddly open underside, and the part that intrigues me is, unlike Solvin's beast or the gaping dragon, there's no teeth present. So I wonder if this will serve as a grab attack we've seen so often, or could just be marked up to boss design. However, I will note there is some kind of magical essence around his abdomen, so perhaps this relates to a grab attack in which he stuffs you into his stomach, causing you to be exposed to this magical glow. Now, his appearance is interesting because he wears a crown of presumed royalty, but his clothing says otherwise, which at most is a glorified piece of cloth. And unlike the other bosses, there's no intertwined design that could hint towards royalty or even wealth. And this is just speculation, but maybe he stole this crown and in doing so it transformed him. But enough of that boss, and let's go to the next one, which is a deformed mess of horns that, has normal feet? Why are they so average looking, But at first I thought he was a normal human overtaken from these growths, except the part that had me stumped was his tail, which has the same growths coming out the end, but more importantly has fur on it, meaning that he wasn't just a normal human, but actually an animal hybrid. And this isn't a new concept to Dark Souls or this trailer, which shows us a wolf boss, but more notably a wolf human. So far what I'm speculating is this boss was an animal hybrid that was overcome by growths, which we can see at the end of his tail and on his head. Although I question my description of growths, because it more so looks like a sprout of horns that emerged from his neck. And I can't be the only one that might see a face in this scene, right? It bothers me because this is the only close-up we get. But this horn man is wearing a cloak that to me at least oozes the vibe of a wise journeyman, and I would like to assume he spent his time trying to obtain this magic we now see in battle. And at first I thought he just threw a beam of light, but if you look closer it's actually a knife, and this ties into the next attack, which is a hammer, making me think he doesn't use typical magic but instead summons an augmented version of a weapon. This next scene shows our character using a similar type of attack. And Miyazaki has mentioned that there are around 100 skills that can be attached to any weapon, and it makes me think that these 2 abilities the boss uses will also be able to obtain. Now, the color and tone to his magic looks exactly the same to that tree in the main hub, so the power of this plant might extend farther than we think. And this is wild speculation, but maybe he journeyed to that tree in order to obtain some of its power, but in doing so it disfigured his face. Also, a new fog gate just dropped with a much needed change, and the mist now holds a golden hue to it, which complements the game's more heroic tone. Now, a new dragon shows up, deeming that same golden color, although I believe this to be the new tarnished theme, which serves as a replacement for Halloween, and the word tarnishing relates to the rusting of an object, and this is what we see on Seath the Scaleful's wings, which doesn't just display the brownish gold of rust, but its more earlier stages of deep green. And when an object rusts, it starts out as green until over time it gains its more brownish hue. And this is exactly what we see on the dragon's wings, which shows hints of green that eventually fade into golden brown. Also, if you're wondering where you fight this guy, the background says it all. And the stone pillars are identical to that gorgeous stone rupture which is shown in the earlier part of the trailer. Now let's get to the actual fight, and there's 2 ways this boss could go. It's either the highly mobile and almost movement-based Midir fight, or the completely still, rolling focused Seath fight. And while making this video, I thought it would function more like Midir, but the more I watch the trailer, the less I see him move. And well, I'm pretty sure his foot never left that rock. Let's look at what I presume is another horse battle, and there's a screenshot of this hunched over person squatting on top of a horse. This mysterious man has torn clothes and withered skin, making it look like he's either undead or somewhat close to it. And just behind his left forearm is an extra arm, and to make a safe assumption, there's likely another one on the other side. but having 4 arms makes sense if you're trying to ride a horse and attack at the same time. Also, it has been confirmed that some encounters only happen during the night, and well, this is one of few screenshots to actually show an enemy at later times, so it's likely that he's one of these time-specific encounters. This next boss is the closest thing you'll get to a furry, but for this short scene we do see a lot, and a close-up reveals most of the boss's design with once again this theme of gold. Also, this is another character with white hair, which has appeared on almost every enemy. But let's get to the obvious part, and that's that this boss is a furry, or more so a wolf. And this is another case of a humanoid animal, which makes me wonder if there will be more animal hybrids. We can also see him wielding an intricately designed sword that shares the same color and details to his armor. And interestingly enough, it looks very similar to the weapon in the teaser. So maybe these two enemies are part of the same kingdom, or at least got their weapon from the same place. Now, this arena might be one of my favorites, and if you pay attention to the background, you'll see floating rubble and bone pillars. And well, this is the same place that appears 40 seconds into the trailer. Although with these exposed edges, I just hope he can't throw you off the edge. The next boss is Lady Maria, this new Rusted Knight, who we all know has that prosthetic arm that she loves to take on and off. But did you know she might also have a prosthetic leg? Right before she puts on her arm, we get a shot of her thigh, which shows this design of curving archways. But the part that has me stumped and is what brings me into the possibility of a prosthetic leg is this bolt on the inside of her knee, that oddly enough has none of the embroidering around it, making me think that this bolt is used to attach the prosthetic leg, and if you look closer, her thigh actually goes over her knee, making it look like her leg could be attached and detached from that joint. I will also bring up how this bolt looks very similar to a real prosthetic leg sleeve, which also has buttons on the side. As previously mentioned on the motif of white hair, our knight avoids this stereotype, and the reason I believe her hair is red is because she hasn't completely hollowed, I mean tarnished. So it could be that characters with red hair haven't completely tarnished, although if you do look closely, we can see there is rust growing on her face, showing us that she could be starting the process? This is all just speculation, so take it at face value, and if you have any of your own ideas, I'd love to hear them. Now apart from that, she puts on a bull-like helmet that has 2 wings sticking out the end, and this is no doubt referencing that character in Berserk, but hear me out on this connection. And her helmet looks a lot like the god of speed's helmet, Hermes. And well, Hermes is known for being the messenger of gods, and as we know, demigods do exist in this world. So she could be trying to convey their message in whatever way she sees fit. Before we move to the next boss, I want to point out an interesting detail. And if you look close enough, she's wielding just a blade. And to any normal person, this would slice their hand. But since she has a prosthetic arm, pain and even feeling is non-existent, allowing her to essentially wield a double-sided sword. Alright, the next boss is this Red Knight, who appears wearing copper armor and has weird wiring throughout his body. But unlike the furry, this red magic comes from the user and not the weapon, which we can see functions as his grabbing attack. And this brings to light what I assume is a new type of boss design, which is that of mixing physical and magical attacks. And we're all aware of bosses that use both, such as Pontiff. But the difference I'm seeing is their mixture into different combos, which uses magic to close the distance and physical to deal the actual blow. And I love this fresh variety to the fights, which honestly makes them all the more intriguing. This next scene shows a new dragon, and I'm unsure if it's a random encounter like the wagon or an actual boss fight. But if I were to guess, I'd point towards an encounter, solely based on this enemy's more average look. Oh, and there's no way they put the Lord Vessel on Smo's head, right? Nope, you're wrong, and I welcome you to Lord Vessel Smo. But in all actuality, this boss is a somewhat obvious callback to Smo. And if you look at this from a player's perspective, this could be a nightmare to fight. And I see this boss going one of two directions. The first being this fire serves as an AoE attack to clear the player out and allow for better positioning for the boss, or the worse option, and that's that the fire rarely ever stops and you're always taking chip damage. But so far everything seems relatively in theme, until you get to his weapon, which sticks out like a sore thumb. And from what I can see, it has a completely different color and texture to his armor, with it almost looking like a demon hammer. But don't take for granted its out of place look, which is likely full of lore on how it's made and why Lord Vessel Smo is using it. This next boss checks off the giant category and shares a familiar appearance with Yorm, but as we can see, he wields a dual-sided weapon with half-circle blades at the end. And this will fare for some interesting attack combos where he can hit you from both sides. Now let's look at his body, which seems to be made out of this ruined stone that would appear ancient in comparison if it weren't for these orange cracks. and although his arm is blocking it, it looks like their source is coming from a core in his stomach. And if I were to guess, this light is likely what powers this sentinel as a whole. Alright, I've been sleeping on this idea for a while, but this stunning moose boss finally brings it to light. And I can't emphasize enough how happy I am that particle effects are being integrated. Sekiro gave us a taste of it with the Sakura Bowl and Divine Confetti, but honestly that wasn't enough and I was left disappointed. Although now with Elden Ring's more mystical tones, it allows for these effects to feel much more in place, and this moose boss displays some of the best of it. But we're lucky enough to get a close-up look of its face where you'll be able to see this shining white on the end of its horns. We also do get a shot of its eyes, which show no life whatsoever, and judging on how he floats through the air, he could be a sort of spirit. And if you've been looking closely, there's these glowing moose that walk throughout the arena. Practical or not, these are just a cool detail. But sadly enough, if I were to guess who the gimmick boss would be, I'd look towards this guy who, so far, isn't even possible to hit. In case you're unaware, Elden Ring has a clear theme of arms, or more specifically hands, so it's fit for there to be a boss of one, and the split second we see of it, we can tell this is no ordinary hand. And well, actually it has 10 fingers, with the middle one? The main one having 3 band rings and 1 gem ring, with the gem ring being purple in color. And at first I thought it was spewing flames, but if you look closer, the source is coming from our character. Of course, the main question is, whose hand is this? And as pointed out in VaatiVidya's video, there's a skull of a giant in the background, so it's highly likely that this is his hand. And if I were to guess, the purple ring is the cause for it still rummaging around. And if you're wondering what this 3-fingered hand is, as pointed out in a really interesting PC Gamer article, our character is basically butt naked, implying that this could be the character creation and you're brought into this world through a glowing hand. As said in an interview, characters will have a larger effect in the storytelling, and well, I previously skimmed over what I thought were these 2 NPCs, except later on we get a shot of this angel flying back in the air, and to my surprise it's the same knight that we see guarding this lady, although now his appearance has changed and he holds a much more angelic look, with this Demon Souls-esque aura around his body. And I am aware angels aren't a new concept to the Dark Souls series, so it's quite possible Miyazaki created a boss of one. Also, the way he stands next to this lady, it could be that he's her guardian angel, and possibly after killing her, he comes to enact revenge. By the way, this encounter is a perfect example of when I said I wanted more particle effects, and wow do they provide. Now this boss embodies the theme of arms as a whole, with him having around 9 arms, all of which I presume aren't his. But this king looks like he's made out of an amalgamation of hide, body parts, and other armor. Although with this shot of him at the bottom, we do see a straggling leg, and if this isn't an attached body part, it could be the king's actual leg, meaning he might be piloting a mecha of fleshy body parts. There's also the shot of what might be toes? I have no clue what this is. Let's look at his axe, which screams royalty, and his crown does confirm this theory, which makes me wonder if he was a king that sacrificed his populace in order to provide for his odd hobby of collecting arms. And we do fight him in a graveyard, so there might be something to this. Also, to add to this theme of too many body parts, his hand does have 6 fingers, although they look natural unlike his arms, which seem pasted on. Now, who doesn't like a little bit of foreshadowing? And in this first scene, we do see him caressing the head of a dragon, and well, in the last, he's wielding it like a weapon. But this dragon head is now attached to his arm and is functioning like a makeshift flamethrower, displaying from what I assume is a type of resurrection magic? But judging by the shots of us fighting him where he doesn't have this head of a dragon, I assume this is a second phase surprise where he rips it off the corpse of one and displays it for all to see. And well, conveniently enough, in the background there's an impaled dragon with its head for the taking. But wow, did I have no clue this trailer displayed that many bosses, and well, in 6 months we're gonna find out if my predictions were even close to being correct. But if anything, hopefully this video proved to you that the wait for Elden Ring was worth it. And also, thank you so much for 2,000 subs, that's just insane, and honestly, these comments are way too nice. But I appreciate you watching up until this point. Have a good one.